It may just be one of the most important documents that come out of the federal government, with major implications for congressional representation, federal funding, and more. But the process of collecting the data for the U.S. Census is usually a pretty boring one, usually being the operative word. This time, ahead of the 2020 census, a controversial citizenship question is prompting a whole lot of debate and legal challenges, going all the way up to the Supreme Court. The question would ask every person living in the U.S. whether they're a citizen. For the first time in almost 70 years. The Commerce Department, which oversees the Census Bureau, argues that the question is nothing new and that the push to include it was based on a December 2017 request from the Department of Justice for data to help enforce the Voting Rights Act.
DOJ sought census block-level citizenship data for use in Voting Rights Act enforcement. That's what we were responding to.
But in an email uncovered during several lawsuits, Commerce Secretary, who you just saw, Wilbur Ross, berated staff members 6 months before the DOJ request, writing, quote, "I am mystified why nothing has been done in response to my months-old request that we include the citizenship question. The case has moved up through the courts, and so far 3 different judges have shot down Ross's argument, but stopped just short of ruling the government intended to discriminate against immigrants, Latinos, Asian Americans by adding the question. Now the attorneys and activists suing to remove the question have new evidence they say will prove their case. They're introducing files found in the personal effects of a GOP redistricting strategist, his name is Thomas Heffler, after he died in August. In a letter to one of the 3 judges, the plaintiffs wrote the documents reveal that Hoffler, I pronounce it wrong, quote, played a significant role in orchestrating the addition of the citizenship question to the 2020 decennial census in order to create a structural electoral advantage for, in his words, Republicans and non-Hispanic whites. The ACLU, which argued against the new question before the Supreme Court in April, is hoping this new information will sway the justices. A decision is expected by the end of June. Joining me are Iván Espinoza-Madrigal, the Executive Director for the Lawyers for Civil Rights. It's good to see you again, Iván. And Peter Skerry, Political Science Professor at BC. Peter, it's great to meet you. Thank you for being here. You know, many experts think disclosure of this letter is too late to affect the Supreme Court outcome. So we're going to start with your arguments for and against before this letter was disclosed, if you don't mind. So let me start with you. Why should the question be in the census?
Well, I think the question is a legitimate question for the census to ask, and it has been asked before, like you noted. But I can't abide or support the way the administration has tried to force this on the Census Bureau. I think this is a potential disaster in the making.
Why do you mean that? Well,
the census is a huge logistical undertaking that we barely pull off as it is every 10 years. And for the amount of planning that needs to go into this, to just get imposed at the last minute like this is a potential disaster.
Do you believe that it's fine, just to be clear, that it's fine that it's there or that it should be there? Those are different things, needless to say.
I think it's a legitimate question to be asked. I have no doubt that there are political motives behind it, and that's evident in the way this is being done. But I think stepping back from it, I think this kind of question is a legitimate question.
Why shouldn't it be there?
It is tremendously damaging at the community level to ask people to disclose not only the status of the person filling out the census form, but of every member of the household.
Why?
In the current climate that we're in, where people of color and immigrants already feel under siege, this is yet another tactic from the federal government, from the Trump White House, to intimidate and drive people deeper into the shadows.
You think there's no legitimate reason for the government to know the citizenship status?
No legitimate reason
I live in Cambridge.
whatsoever.
They ask me what my nationality is. Now, I know it doesn't affect redistricting and funding and those kinds of things, but they ask me that question. My understanding is virtually every city in town does. Is that...
Not every city in town. Boston does as well. I just filled out my own census form for the city of Boston, and I left that question blank, as what we're suggesting to anybody who wants to avoid this type of intrusive and deeply harmful question. Leave it blank. The government doesn't need to know this.
Yeah, the Supreme Court justices in their arguments, we expect a decision by the end of June, echoed some of the things you said. I want to play for you something that Sotomayor, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, said in the April 23rd oral argument. Here it is.
There is no doubt that people will respond less because of the census. That has been proven in study after study. One census surveyor described an incident where he walked into a home, started asking citizenship, and the person stopped and left his home.
Peter, is she right, and is it relevant, what she had to say? Does it matter if it turns out it discourages people, or is it still an appropriate exercise of the authority of the federal government?
Well, she's right. That is a dynamic that is real and that one has to take into account. And let me just be clear. My point would be that this is a legitimate kind of question to ask. At the same time, I can't support what the Trump administration is doing right now. I find it hard to disagree.
You mean about
with
immigrants
my
in
colleague.
general you're talking about, or you mean on the question?
I mean about this question right now at this point in time in our history. It's clear what's driving this. But the more
we'll finish the sentence. What is it? Racism? What's driving it?
It's partisan politics. Clearly, the Republicans have had a game plan in mind for some time. And, you know, I think it's...
And that Hoffler letter, I assume, which I asked you not to comment on, but now will, reaffirms that. Is that not underline the point you're making?
That does underline. But let me make the other side of the point, too, which is that the Democrats are also involved in this politically, obviously. That doesn't get talked about. But the Democrats have benefited from large numbers of non-citizens in these voting rights districts that have been drawn. Those are rotten boroughs.
Wait, non-citizenship, meaning you're not arguing like the president does that they're voting in huge numbers.
No,
you mean in terms of the construct of a district or federal funding coming.
When you have a congressional district of 850,000 people and 200,000 or 300,000 of those are undocumented immigrants, you're getting a free ride.
Understood.
No, absolutely not. That is not
Explain
a free ride.
Why.
It is, according to the long-standing legal and political system, the districts are drawn based on total population because every human counts. And that is clearly established law. Whether you disagree with that is a different
You're
thing.
suggesting that everybody in there doesn't count when it's drawn?
And the Supreme Court just
My
addressed
understanding
this.
is exactly what he said.
Well,
No?
what does everybody counts mean? It's a strange position for what I take to be a liberal organization to take, that being counted means that you get counted by the census and you're included in the numbers. But how is that elected official accountable to you if you're here illegally or you're not enrolled to vote?
What you're proposing is deeply dangerous.
What am I
to
proposing?
Allow politicians to not be accountable to every human being who lives in their district. That is dangerous. And we've seen the results of that time and time
Well, I
again.
think what Peter's saying is how are they held accountable if
Lowell,
But I think what Peter's saying is how are they held accountable if the person who, quote, represents them can't vote for them or against them?
Well, then they don't. People, citizens, don't always come out to vote. You have the right to not exercise your right to vote.
We're not talking about citizens right now.
And so people, even U.S. citizens, don't always come out to hold their representatives
we only
accountable.
have, if I may, for just to try to problem solve just for a minute, because we only have a minute left. The conventional wisdom is going to be 5-4 in favor of the Trump administration. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that is the case, and you both seem to agree on one thing: that it is going to suppress participation. What does one do about that after the fact, or is the damage done and there's nothing to do?
We are doing a robust community outreach and education campaign. If you go to lawyersforcivilrights.org/census, we have Know Your Rights materials. We launched a census hotline to be able to walk people through the citizenship
You mean
question.
urging them to participate?
Absolutely. Urging them to participate safely so that we don't end up losing a congressional seat like we did at the last census. This affects all of us. It affects billions of dollars coming to the state. And so if our immigrant neighbors do not feel comfortable filling out the census, we all get hurt.
You get the last 15 seconds. You want it?
Yeah, I thought the question was, is this a good idea? No, it's a bad idea as put forward by the Trump administration. This could be a disaster.
But probably constitutionally permissible.
Probably.
Peter, nice to meet you. Thank you. Iván, it's good
Thank
to see
you for
again.
having me.
Thank you so
Yes.
much for your time, gentlemen.